I do want to read. If you weren't listening to the last hour of the programme, I have to say, contains some completely beautiful calls about people's experience of grief following what Prince Harry was said to have written in his book about losing his mum. So I just wanted to read a couple of texts that came through in the last hour that I didn't manage to get to. This is my first time messaging into LBC, says this texter who hasn't left a name. But I felt compelled to message after hearing some callers. I'm 31 years old. I lost my dad in similar circumstances, aged 5. It's impossible to articulate the trauma of having a parent there 1 minute and gone the next. I relate deeply to Harry's words and appreciate his willingness to speak publicly about grief. To call it attention-seeking is shameful. I wanted to make 2 points. The first is that bereavement experienced in childhood is completely different to bereavement experienced in adulthood. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but different. As a child, I didn't understand the permanence of my dad's death, nor did I have the language to articulate or begin to process my experience. My grief has been cyclical, with me revisiting it and it impacting me differently throughout my development. The second is that, for me, what runs deep with the annoyance some people, especially the media, appear to feel about Harry sharing his story, is our country's discomfort about speaking around death and grief. The idea that to be British is to keep calm and carry on, that sharing your experience is attention-seeking or a sign of weakness. I think the royal family's approach of keeping quiet perpetuates this and contributes to a wider stigma around grieving. I wish more people had the emotional intelligence to share their experience as Harry has. I know, for me at least, it's been deeply comforting to hear. Well said.
Royal truth. When I heard that LBC segment with Tom Swarbrick and that deeply moving caller, it struck me that this was one of those rare, genuine moments when the noise of royal gossip gave way to something profoundly human. The caller's words carried the weight of real experience, someone who had lost their father at the age of 5, speaking not from a place of judgment, but of understanding. Their statement that it's shameful when people accuse Prince Harry of being attention-seeking for speaking about his grief was not just a defence, it was an act of compassion. And it revealed everything wrong with how society treats men who dare to open up emotionally. This caller understood what so many commentators and armchair critics refuse to see, that Harry's willingness to share his pain is not weakness. It's emotional intelligence of the highest order. It takes immense courage to stand in front of the world and speak about the kind of trauma that shaped your entire existence. But instead of empathy, he's met with ridicule, mockery, and cheap headlines. Yet, as that listener said so perfectly, if more people had the emotional intelligence Harry has shown, we'd live in a world where healing isn't mocked, it's honoured. What people forget is that Harry's story isn't some publicity stunt. It's a lifelong journey of surviving grief under the harshest spotlight imaginable. The world watched a 12-year-old boy walk behind his mother's coffin, surrounded by cameras, told to show no emotion. That image has haunted millions. But imagine being that boy. Imagine being told to hide every tear, to stay composed for the cameras, to represent strength even as your heart breaks in front of the entire planet. That was Harry's introduction to loss. He wasn't given space to grieve like any normal child would be. Instead, he was expected to bury his emotions for the sake of a royal facade. So, when people now criticize him for talking about his grief, what they're really doing is punishing him for breaking out of the emotional prison that palace life built around him. And, that's what makes this caller's message so powerful. They saw through the noise. They recognized the bravery in his honesty, the therapy in his words, and the healing power in his voice. Because anyone who has truly suffered loss knows that grief doesn't go away. It just finds a quieter place inside you. Speaking about it is not attention-seeking, it's survival. What makes the hypocrisy worse is how the same people who call for mental health awareness turn around and attack Harry for embodying it. He's not out there selling sadness, he's dismantling the stigma around it. He's showing men, especially those under enormous social pressure, that talking about pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And Meghan Sussex has been right beside him through it all, the steady, grounding presence who encouraged him to stop repressing and start healing. The way she's been vilified for that is, honestly, appalling. The public should be celebrating her for helping her husband face trauma rather than drown in it. But instead, critics call her manipulative or controlling, as if a woman supporting her husband's emotional growth is somehow an act of rebellion. You know, it's the same old misogyny that destroyed Diana. Now it's just recycled and dressed up as concern. Meghan didn't just love Harry. She helped him unlearn years of royal conditioning that told him emotions were dangerous, that silence was safer than truth. Together, they've modelled something truly revolutionary. A marriage built on openness, mutual care, and emotional honesty, not just royal protocol. When that LBC caller spoke, you could really feel their empathy bleeding through every word. This wasn't just a fan defending a prince, it was a human being defending humanity. They understood the cruelty in mocking someone for expressing grief. Losing a parent at such a young age, well, it changes your life forever. It molds your fears, your insecurities, your reactions. And Harry, well, he has lived every day of his life under that shadow, amplified by relentless scrutiny. The tabloids that once chased his mother into a tunnel now chase him for daring to talk about it. They say he's rehashing the past, but what they really mean is that they're uncomfortable seeing the consequences of their actions. The media can dish out trauma, but can't bear to face it reflected back. The truth is, Harry's voice threatens the entire royal PR machine. Because he's not supposed to be real, he's supposed to be perfect. But by telling his story, by saying I suffered too, he shattered the illusion that royalty equals emotional invincibility. And that's why they come for him so hard. Because vulnerability is power, and power in the hands of the honest terrifies those built on lies. Tom Swarbrick deserves credit for allowing that caller to speak uninterrupted, for giving space to truth, instead of turning it into another radio brawl. That moment, simple yet profound, was what journalism should be: empathetic, balanced, and human. Too often, we see people like Piers Morgan or certain tabloids twist Harry's pain into entertainment, using his trauma for clicks. But this call reminded everyone listening that real people relate to Harry, not because he's a prince, but because he's a son who lost his mother too soon. It stripped away the royal titles, the tabloids, the noise, and revealed the beating heart beneath all that spectacle. The British media may have forgotten, but the public hasn't. People recognise sincerity when they hear it. They know the difference between performance and authenticity. And Harry's authenticity, his willingness to say, I hurt and I'm healing, is what gives others permission to do the same. And then there's Meghan, constantly dragged through the mud for being the one person who refused to let history repeat itself. She's been his partner in truth-telling, his mirror of strength. When she spoke to Oprah about her mental health struggles, they accused her of faking it. But time has shown that Meghan's words were not for sympathy, they were for survival. She turned her pain into purpose. Every time she and Harry talk about mental health, whether it's in their Netflix projects or at events, they're not looking for pity. They're building awareness. They're showing the world that even those who seem to have everything can still struggle inside. And yet, the haters can't handle that, because it forces them to confront their own lack of empathy. The monarchy thrives on appearances. Harry and Meghan thrive on truth. That's why they'll always be targets. Because truth exposes hypocrisy, and these two have been holding up the mirror since the day they walked away from the institution. Grief doesn't discriminate by class or crown. It's the great equalizer. It humbles everyone. Harry isn't exploiting his pain, he's reclaiming it. He's taking back the narrative from a media empire that's tried to define his entire life. And Meghan, standing beside him, represents everything the royal family failed to be: empathetic, transparent, and deeply human. Their love isn't about glamour, it's about growth, it's about breaking cycles, it's about choosing peace over pretense. And that's what real power looks like. The lesson from that LBC moment is clear. We need more people like that caller. People who understand that emotional honesty is not weakness, that sharing pain is not attention-seeking, and that healing in public can inspire healing in private.